The funeral, the main service. Scene leaves the boardroom and is back at the chapel where Buddy is shaking Cheryl's hand. Buddy de Klerk. Thank you so much for coming, Cheryl. Mother always thought a lot of you. I appreciate you being here. Cheryl. Sorry to be here under these conditions. Buddy turns on his heel and walks away. The other leaders are looking bored or embarrassed. The campus clock chimes. Buddy goes over to the seat where Leslie is sitting. Buddy says, well, I guess that means it's about time to get the show on the road. Buddy indicates with a sideways nod of the head that it is time to go on the platform. They ascend the platform, which is about 6 feet above the congregation. Grandma's casket is in front of the lectern. Scented candles flicker around the open casket. Buddy and Leslie are the only ones seated on the platform. On cue, Ginger begins to play Abide With Me on her violin. The pallbearers file up, 3 down each aisle, and sit on the front rows. Ginger is finished, and the violin and the pallbearers are seated. Granddaughter-in-law Gerald's wife, Wanda, sings Amazing Grace. When she finishes, Leslie stands up. Repeating. On cue, Ginger begins to play Abide With Me on her violin. The pallbearers file up, 3 down each aisle, and sit on the front rows. Ginger is finished with the violin music, and the pallbearers are seated. Granddaughter-in-law Gerald's wife, Wanda, sings Amazing Grace. When she finishes, Leslie stands up. Ethel McCrae de Klerk was born on March 19, 1901 in Deering, North Dakota. Her parents were Joseph Daniel McCrae and Ida Mae Greeno. She married Jake de Klerk in the year that World War II started. They met at a camp meeting and soon ended up in the same boarding academy. Then they were in nursing school at the same time. To make money for school, they sold books door to door. Their transportation was a motorcycle with a sidecar. Leslie's picture fades away, and the picture of Jake and Ethel on a motorcycle with a sidecar shows on the screen. Sound is narration. They spent summer selling the books, and the rest of the time was spent in school. They worked all summer and had enough money for both of their tuition, but they were robbed at the end of the summer, so Ethel stayed out a year and helped Jake finish. Jake's goal was always to be a doctor, so he continued his training, while Ethel also went to school. Grandpa finished his education and they moved to the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas, where he set up his practice. Ethel was his nurse and helpmeet, and they helped many patients together. Picture of old cars being pulled through the sand by horses. Grandma once told me that there was a time when there were teams of horses that dragged cars through the sandy areas of the roads going down to South Texas. That was a big trip back then. She went from seeing buggies to driving and riding in cars over paved roads. In South Texas, they had a clinic where they delivered babies. Then they felt the need to help orphans in Guatemala. So with the help from other doctors related to him, they set up a foundation, bought some land, and eventually began an orphanage, which eventually also included a large farm and the equipment to make and store food. On one of the trips back from Guatemala, Grandpa died of a heart attack. Grandmother kept on actively supporting the orphanage by helping to keep the books and an active fundraising for the orphanage. Grandmother is survived by 2 daughters, 2 sons, Buddy, his current wife May, and ex-wife Ruth, and their 4 children, and Judy and their 2 girls, William de Klerk and Sally. 2 daughters, Fernie Evanston and Gretchen Rosecrans, and husband Mike, 11 grandchildren and 37 great-grandchildren. She was preceded in death by her husband Jake, her parents, and 2 of her grandchildren. I've been invited to share Grandmother's favorite psalm with you. It's the 103rd Psalm, and it is my favorite also. It begins, Bless the Lord, O my soul, all that is within me, bless his holy name. Leslie continues to read through the psalm. Then he sits down, has a prayer, and sits down. Buddy stands up. Some of the great-grandchildren elbow each other and snicker. Buddy, we're here to remember and celebrate the life of a remarkable woman, Ethel McCrae Clerk, who was my dear mother. Mother dear was a very special person. Leslie has shared with you some of those things that happened in her life. She was a woman of boundless energy and complete devotion to her family. Anyone even remotely connected with her family was considered family to her. She adopted one boy and served hundreds of other children through the orphanage, putting some through school and college. She actually spent 5 years living in Guatemala at the orphanage and really enjoyed it. I think she liked living down there better than Texas, which she said was way too cold for her. The camera has moved from looking to Buddy from the front to shooting from his back where the audience can be seen. Camera slowly focuses on clock in the back of the room. Buddy's talking overlaps with himself. Clock shows that 40 minutes have passed. Buddy continued, and so as we remember Mother today, we can look with fondness on the light and example that she was not only for her family, but to everyone that she had contact with. We're really going to miss her. All this was done with a dry eye and no great emotion. Buddy sits down. Leslie stands up. Now we're going to let those who would like to say something about grandmother come forward. If you want to stay where you are, we can bring a portable mic to you. We would just like for everyone to be able to hear. Wife number 2, Judy O'Shea, jumps up first and comes to the podium. Judy, I loved Ethel a lot. We became good friends in New York. We had several interests in common, and she was always talking about her son, Buddy. She kept telling me over and over what a great guy he was, and how he never messed up, and how his previous wife had not been faithful. She had a child by another man while they were married. I listened to her for a while, and then I decided I would like to meet this fine man she was talking about. Well, we decided to get married, and then I found out what this man really was like. We were together for 13 years, and he was nothing but trouble. Buddy is squirming in his seat. The seminary officials exchanged knowing glances and quietly exited the building. The camera does a quick cut to Ruth, wife number 1, who is in the mother's room with son Gerald looking through the window. Ruth declares, I cannot believe what I'm hearing. This is hilarious. Gerald declared, I can tell you that Dad does not look too comfortable. Quick cut back to Judy. Judy, I feel like I need to say this. We had 2 wonderful girls together, and he messed them up. He claimed to be such a righteous person, but he was a heel. I could not have stayed married to him as long as I did, except for his patient mother, who did everything she could to keep us together. I was told all kinds of bad things about Ruth, but I've discovered that they were mostly lies. I wish I'd believed some of the things she said. I probably would not have married Buddy. I don't think he ever loved me, and he used the kids and their musical ability for his own aggrandizement. Takes a deep breath. Well, I loved Ethel. She lived with us some and helped take care of the girls. That was a big help to us. The one thing I did not agree with her was on her extreme protectiveness of Buddy. He could just do no wrong in her eyes. I loved her, but I just wish she had not introduced me to Buddy. Judy starts off the platform, but not before turning around and giving Buddy a telling glance. Judy walks over and sits with her daughters. Ginger, Mom, I can't believe you did that. Good for you. The daughters grab hands and squeeze, grinning. A kind of stunned silence for a moment or two. Buddy squirms in his seat behind the pulpit. Finally, Gretchen stands up. Gretchen Rosecrans. Mother dear was a sweet soul. She was born in Nebraska on a farm where they barely survived. Her parents struggled there for years, sticking it out until all their kids finished high school. Then they sold out and moved to California. The people that bought the land found oil and became millionaires, but that's not the real story. While the family still had the farm, she went to boarding school to study nursing. There she met a handsome young man who was also taking nursing. Well, they took a liking to each other, and soon they decided to get married. There were only two problems. One, Daddy had to have his mother's permission to get married because of his age, and two, the school did not allow juniors to get married. Well, this was about the time that World War I was starting, and the draft was kicking in. Well, Daddy was prime fodder for the draft. His mother was terrified, so Daddy explained to her that if he were to get married, that they would not draft him. All of a sudden, his mother dropped all of her objections to him getting married, and the school told the couple not to tell what they had done or brown, but go ahead and do what they had to do. So they got married. The senior year was coming. Like Leslie said, they sold books all summer, going around the motorcycle with a sidecar. By the end of the summer, they had enough money for both to continue on that year. But then they got robbed, so Ethel hung back a year and Daddy went on to school. And Daddy went on to be a doctor and Mother finished her nursing, and they worked together from that time until Daddy died. She was a child of the Depression. One time I asked her, how did they get through that Great Depression? She said, oh, honey, we were so depressed already, we didn't even know the Depression was going on. She could be funny like that at times. Love you, Mother dear. Gerald the clerk and Sylvia, cousins, come up together and take turns talking. Gerald, we were kind of blocked out of the family after the divorce, but I remember going to the old house in Elsa where we would have a ball playing with the cousins. Sandra and I sort of teamed up, and Leslie and Dale teamed up. It was just sort of a natural thing. Sandra and I were more into mischief than Leslie and Dale. Sandra Rosecrans. One of the things I remembered about Grandmother was her attic. Her attic was a treasure trove of odds and ends. Parts of a train set, single shoes, boxes of Christmas decorations, and on and on. Grandmother was a child of the Depression. She could not throw anything away. And you could never know what new thing would show up in the attic. It was always an adventure, although it was always a hot and dusty one. Gerald the clerk. Sandra and I were rummaging around in the hay barn, and we found salt tablets. Everyone was supposed to take them when they did too much sweating. We raided them and sucked a lot of them. I guess we didn't get enough to kill us. Sandra. We liked to play in the old house that was in the back. It was not much more than block walls at the time. I don't even remember if it had a roof, but it made a good fort to hide in, and we used to torment Leslie and Dale. Gerald. I remember one time Grandmother came to our home in Carolina. Leslie and I had a Play-Doh recipe that Mother let us make. Flour, water, salt, I don't remember what else. Well, we mixed it up, and for some reason it didn't work. So we decided to make it into a loaf of bread instead. We put it into a loaf pan and baked it for a long time. Finally, it got a little bit brown on top, so we took it out. It was as hard as a rock. It had a terrible taste. It was horrible. So we lost interest and we were going to throw it away. Well, Grandmother would not hear of it. She decided that she would eat it so that it did not get thrown away or wasted. Well, even she could not eat it. She made a valiant attempt, but just could not do it. Sandra. She tried stuff like that in Guatemala. The fruit was plentiful at the orphanage, but even so, Grandmother did not want to waste anything. She made her sick several times by eating something that was spoiled. And speaking of spoiled, she spoiled her grandchildren and loved them, and we loved her. And while we're talking about food, I remember the ice cream incident. Ice cream did not usually last too long at Grandmother's, but the grandkids had been gone for a while, and we came pouring in, and there was ice cream in the freezer, and well, we tucked into it. But strangely, none of us came back for more. That was a dead giveaway. Grandmother got worried that there might be something wrong with us. We were afraid to tell her the real problem. It seems that Granddaddy had caught some fish and thrown them in the freezer without wrapping them too well, and the ice cream tasted like frozen fish. When we finally told her what the problem was, she tried to eat it, and even she could not stand it, so the dogs had fish ice cream that night. We loved her, and she loved us. Never was a grandmother like her. Gerald and Sylvia leave the platform. Gerald goes back to Mother's room with his mom. Estelle and Lynn come up. Lynn Rosecrans. What I remember about Grandmother was the old house and the porch that ran all the way around it. We've talked about it, and it seemed amazing how that house really seemed so big when we were kids and so small when we went back and saw it as an adult. A lot of good memories in that place. Grandmother was always cooking something special for us. Estelle Rosecrans. I remember Christmases. If we were there, Grandmother would go up into the attic and start bringing down the decorations, the garland, old chipped colored lights, glass balls, and other things to hang on the tree. She would pop up a bunch of popcorn and went to eat and string it up at the same time. Not sure which we did the most of, but we got a lot of feet of popcorn garland before it was all over. Lynn Rosecrans. And what about Alvin? Estelle. And the Chipmunks. Lynn and Estelle sing together. Christmas, Christmas time is here, time of joy and time of cheer. We've been good, but we can't last. Hurry, Christmas, hurry fast. They both break out in laughter. Lynn Rosecrans. I don't know how she stood it. Maybe it's why she went deaf. We would put the record on and play it over and over and over, and loudly too, and she never would say a word. Estelle Rosecrans. Well, we all sure knew that she loved us, and she sure put up a lot from all of us. See you in heaven, Grandmother. Dale, a woman, and Leslie come to the podium. Cousins. Dale Rosecrans. One thing I remember is picnics. We had a lot of picnics. We would go to somewhere that there was water, and we would swim, and they would have a picnic. And we were in the water, we would wash with ivory soap because it would always float. And then we would drip dry while we ate. And there were usually baked beans, and we could know that we'd had those before because the paper plates would be stained by the beans from the last picnic. I never saw anyone else try to wipe paper plates and reuse them. Leslie DeClerc. I can remember rides in Grandmother and Granddaddy's green and white VW bus. It was the kind that you could pull the roof back and we could all stand up and carry on, shouting at cows or cars or whatever. And we had two favorite songs, Rabbit Ain't Got No Tail at All and 99 Bottles of Beer on the Wall. And we would sing them both loud and long. I think we got down to one bottle of beer several times. Don't have any idea how many verses of Rabbit we got to. It was all hilarious fun. It is a wonder that the adults didn't kill us on the spot. Dale Rosecrans. Yeah, I remember some of that. I also remember Grandmother was always cold, especially as she got older. We would come here to visit her and it would be 95 plus degrees outside and she'd be wearing a long sleeve sweater and it would be almost 100 in the house and she would say, well, I know that you must be hot, so I'm going to turn the air conditioning down to 85 and I'll put on another sweater. I also remember her praying. She would jump on her bed and pull the covers over her and kneel so she wouldn't get cold. And then she would pray for 20 minutes about people, and she named names and situations one by one, on and on. I never heard of anyone praying like that. I certainly couldn't. And she had a sharp memory. I didn't inherit that. Leslie DeClerc. I remember Christmases too. Grandmother always bought coloring books for all the grandchildren. I remember she did that until we were well into our teens. We always knew what we were going to get for Christmas. I guess that was the sign of things to come. Now it seems like all adults color. I also remember the Christmas tree and decorations. If we happened to be there at the right time, we would be helping put down or take up the Christmas decorations. and the house was always glorious during the holidays. And yes, I guess I sang the Alvin song enough too. Grandmother was so indulgent. I don't know where she got her patience from. Leslie and Dale sit down. Then great-grandkids come near the casket. The handheld mic is passed around while they're talking. Little girl with pigtails. I'm going to miss Grandma. I like to sit by her and she would read us stories, and I like the stories. I like Grandma. She rubs her eyes with her fists and she can't talk anymore. She runs back to her mom and buries her head in her mom's lap. Pound the clock. Hands move rapidly, advancing 1.5 hours. Guatemalan men. Mother de Klerk was as good as my mom. I did not have any family and they took me into the orphanage. I grew up there, learned to do honest work, went to school and then on to college, and when it came time she sent me here to go to the seminary. I would probably not have survived if there had not been for her and Daddy de Klerk. I know I will see her in heaven again. Bye-bye, Mother. I've been asked to have closing prayer, and then you may come by and view Mama de Klerk. Let's bow our heads. Oh, Father, in this time of grief, we ask for your love to surround us, and we ask that your peace to fill us, and we ask for your Spirit to comfort us in Jesus' name. Amen. The congregation responds, Amen. Guatemalan man continues, I've been asked by the family to invite you to lunch in the senior center where you can continue to share about Ethel. If you would like to see Ethel once again, come forward as the ushers guide you. Ushers begin guiding people to come in and view Ethel. The candles are burning, 1 or 2 are burnt out. The smell is obvious by people's reactions. Some of the little grandkids ask to be lifted up so that they can see Gamma. Buddy is standing at the head of the casket the whole time. When May comes through, she stays at Buddy's side. Ruth and Judy have been talking together as they waited in line. When they get to the casket, Buddy pulls them close and loudly says, Here are my 3 great wives. Isn't it great to be together? There were disgusted looks on the faces of Judy and Ruth. May just looks humiliated. Some of the bystanders just shake their heads. Buddy is so totally oblivious. One by one, the people continue to file out. The funeral director closes the casket, blows out the candles, then goes over to the pallbearers and ushers them to the casket. They line up on each side, and Ethel is carried out by the pallbearers and placed in back of the van. Elijah is directing the pallbearers. Elijah, watch ahead. That tailgate hangs down just a tad. Don't want you getting a goose egg on your head now, you hear? Grandmother is loaded. One of the pallbearers shuts the door and slaps the van. Buddy drives off to the senior center with Mother in the back. Fade out.